Another world. Another time.
In the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Dea, Dera,
Your vital essence, the dark crystal.
Kida.
Come, see for yourself.
Garu.
How very interesting.
Dea. I feel the song of Thra in my heart. Now go, you heroes of Thra.
Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast. I'm your host, Philip.
I'm Jamie.
And I'm your host, Ethan. Let's dig in. Let's feast on the Dark Crystal.
Have that Nebri feast as we're talking about the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. And on this episode, we're going to talk about episode 9 of the show, which is called The Crystal Coals. We're going to try and, we're going to talk about, with episode 9, but we are going to talk about the show as a whole. So again, just so you know that, if you are listening it to the first time, there's going to be spoilers for the whole show. Just wanted to let you know about that way in advance. But yeah, I mean, it's just been, it's always been a lot of fun talking about all these episodes of the show. And yeah, we're just going to keep on going. And yeah, I mean, we're almost there. We're almost there. We almost, the penultimate episode. And I can't wait to, when we reach, the last, the next episode being the episode 10 roundtable and have it all wrapped up. But we're still going to be talking about Age of Resistance for quite a long time. So, I mean, really, all this is sort of a bit like, just a tip of the iceberg, essentially. But so much fun indeed. We'll get into with the episode 9. And I think probably one of the biggest surprises that actually happened at the start of the episode was, with all the characters that are sort of on top of the sanctuary tree, they all made it out. And, the Grottons are safe, the Aratham got out. She was sort of knocked out, because of the power that she was, trying to do to heal the Nurlocks in episode 8, and got to a point where Rian sort of carried her up. And again, I just love Maudra, Argot, she's like, Rian carried you to safety. He must be very strong. And I thought that was a little funny, moment in there. Getting back to it, that the surprise was they realized about the Dual Glaive, that it's back in the caves of Grot. We've got to go back in there to get it. And then Maudra, Argot, she ends up, smashing her cane and sort of reveals that, well, she was carrying, one of them for such a long time, which I thought that was a good twist, because I actually thought that maybe we were going to get into like sort of that Indiana Jonesy sort of, we're going to find this, this Dual Glaive, this piece of treasure, that sort of thing, that could, save the world, that sort of thing. Yeah. And I just wanted to know, because I know, you like your thoughts about that, Ethan, because I know like in Dark Crystal lore, I mean, I think we might have talked about this, especially with the books, I think in Tides of the Dark Crystal, where Rian had to go to find some object or something. I think we had theories about, it's, could be in the Tombs of Relics, which is a place, in the Caves of Grot. And I think, watching the show, I mean, I sort of thought that, we might be going there to the Tomb of Relics, and there might be like an episode where Rian's just trying to find the Dual Glaive.
Oh yeah, and you paint this whole picture in your head, like going through the tomb, maybe, fighting monsters or something, and meeting early the what's his name, storyteller?
Yes, yeah.
This whole thing, and then it's like record scratch. Oh, I had it here in my cane the whole time, boy. Yeah. Here you go. It's like, oh shoot. It's kind of like the Trial by Air. You're like, oh man, we're gonna have this epic Gelfling fight. They're gonna fly through the air. They're gonna push each other, smash each other on the rocks. Like, we're gonna get a whole thing, and then record scratch like, girl, you can have that crown. I got my own. I dress in dark colors now. It's like, the series does that a couple times. You kind of paint this whole scene in your head, a whole sequence. Probably could have been a whole episode in itself, and then, oh, okay, we're going this direction. It's not a bad thing. It's just like, oh shoot, I saw that going a different way, but this is okay too.
There's interesting symmetry happening between Maudra Argot and Aughra. First of all, their names are similar. Second of all, their characteristics, their mannerisms, the way that they present themselves, they're sort of funny, a little bit like Yoda, comical, self-effacing, but also serious. And much like Aughra in the original film was in possession of the shard, Maudra Argot was also in possession of the shard. And I'm curious where that's going to go. If, I don't know, because in the original film, Aughra reminds me so much of Maudra Argot. And I'm wondering if Maudra Argot's, it's hard to go from these names, if her essence will transfer to Aughra. I don't know. There's strange symmetry happening between these two characters with similar names and similar mannerisms. So I'm curious where that will lead. Maybe it won't lead anywhere. Maybe it's just the symmetry of storytelling. I don't know, but it's definitely worth commenting on.
No, it's funny you say that because I was gonna say unpopular opinion, but I kind of like Maudra Argot better than Aughra. Like I could.
What?
I know. I could watch her all day. She cracks me up. Like Louise Gold's voice, just, oh my gosh, she cracks me up. She's just the way she cackles, like, oh man, she's a little flirt. Oh my god, I could just watch her all day.
Yeah.
Like, I love
show.
Aughra. I love Donna Kimball too, but
yeah,
Maudra Argot is just hilarious. When she first goes to Deet's house and knocks all the crap off of that table, and it's very Aughra-like, but at the same time, she feels like a new character, like a real fleshed out character. She doesn't feel like she's trying to be like a rip off of anything or any. She just feels like this new fun gelfling, and I absolutely adore. Probably one of my favorite characters. Like, probably, right up there.
I love her too. I really do.
Because I remember, like, I think when both of you, when you saw the first episode for the first time, and I remember, I think Ethan, you were saying that that Skeksis was probably going to be potentially your favorite character, like your favorite Skeksis of the show. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I loved Argot, especially from the first episode, just her introduction, and she's just a funny little gelfling, it's just just
I guess
so
I
cool,
like women with husky voices, huh? Skeksis,
oh yeah.
Aughra, Argot, never thought of that.
And Argot, she definitely balances the serious tone. Like she realizes that there's some heavy things happening and things need to be done. At the same time, she's also a balance between like, hey, it's not all that serious. I mean, it's serious, but like she's just some laughter that I think is necessary,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Going, from above the sanctuary tree, and them, with Rand holding the sword, and it was pretty cool. I mean, that was the other thing, that even though like Argot only had one piece of the sword, so I mean they could have easily been like, oh yep, here's the whole sword, all all as one. It was kind of cool that at least there was a bit of a challenge that with Rand and Deet, they had to go back to Stone in the Wood to find the other piece of the sword, and we sort of got that backstory about how how Auden, he had the Dual Glaive during the Arathan Wars, and I think this is going to be part of the backstory that we're sort of going to get in the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance comics. As of this recording, we just got up to issue 3, and that's going to get wrapped up in the next issue with issue 4. So that's been really cool. That at least we got this glimpse within the show, but being potentially expanded in other mediums, which has been pretty cool in that regard. And I was just thinking, just like the things like that happens like in this episode. I think one thing that really shook me was when when we see like Bria and Celadon and they're about to get drained of their essence, and then Aughra sort of comes in and, you know, offers a trade, you know, to sacrifice her life, you know, in exchange for freeing pretty much all the Gelflings inside the Castle of the Crystal in the cages and whatnot. Again, I mean, this is probably one of the such a great scene between Aughra and all the Skeksis, and she's talking about how Skekmal, you know, how Skekmal is like probably the most beautiful of all Skeksis, and which sort of, and then of course, you know, leading up to her sacrifice and the moment where she vanishes. I think when I watched that episode for the first time, the whole time I was just thinking, you know, how's Aughra going to come back? I don't know, you guys. I don't know what you know, when you saw, you know, Aughra when she vanished, you know, in that episode, were you just thinking like throughout the whole show about, you know, how is she going to come back?
No, so yeah, when we first saw her getting drained, I thought, oh, this explains why Aughra was so indifferent and almost cold in the film. I was like, oh, okay, so they drained her essence. Oh, man, that explains it. So clever. And then she explodes and disappears, and I'm like, okay, all right. Yeah, I thought maybe, you know, she would, like, come out of the ground again or something. I don't, like, the way she comes back, though, I never would have guessed. You know, if you had shown me her getting drained and then exploding, disappearing, and then asked me, like, oh, what's going to happen to her next? I never would have guessed what happened. That was good writing. That blew me away. But the sacrifice was very Aslan / Jesus Christ to me. You know, like Aslan, I think it's Edmund or something. Like, you know, hey, White Witch, you know, hand over Edmund. I'll sacrifice myself for him or something. And then, you know, Aslan gets killed and comes back. I don't know, the next day. I don't remember. But, you know, a very mythological. You know, I thought that was a really clever thing to do with Aughra, what they do here.
And the way she returns as well. It's very clever. It's very original. It wasn't like Gandalf. It wasn't like, you know, she spiritually appears and like as someone's disappearing, she's appearing. It's very,
it's absolutely, very beautiful. Yeah. I love the way that she returned, and basically all the Skeksis were, you know, freaking out about her return, like in that moment in episode 10. But yeah, I just remember like when I was watching this episode for the first time, and yeah, when she disappeared, I think like pretty much every scene that sort of followed through, I was just I don't know, I was just thinking about Aughra. I'm like, how is she going to come back? Like, I know she has to come back, but how and why and all those sort of things. So yeah, it was just one of the incredible things. And I mean, I just love, like with Aughra, it's like, oh, you know, spinning chairs and sort of the continuing sort of humor that she has.
That surprised me. Her cracking jokes about the spinning chairs and stuff. Like, really? Here of all, that was almost like Marvel-esque. Like, I love Marvel movies, but they do like to undercut the drama with some humor. Like, you know, and I don't have a problem with that. You know, in AOR, you know, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't take it out. But it did surprise me. Like, ooh, I thought this was supposed to be a dark moment. I don't know. But, you know.
That's one thing I've noticed, I think, with some of the writers who are part of Generation X these days, and I see it in Marvel. I've seen it not really too much, so maybe a little bit in AOR, but like I've seen it in other where it's like quip after quip. And I saw it in like Last Jedi, and just like this really interesting tense scene, and then all of a sudden you're brought right out of it with some modern reference, or at least the tone feels very, you know, the world that we live in now. It's a little bit too meta or something like that. And it's an interesting, and I think writers really have to like pull themselves back and say, no, it's okay. Let it play out. Let the story, you don't need a comedic break every time. You can let this play out. It's okay. We could handle serious stuff. At any rate, I thought it's interesting.
Oh no, yeah, like I'm a very awkward person, so I heavily used humor as a crutch to get through just a regular conversation. But in drama, it's like, yeah, kind of rein it in and let the tone. The only thing I could think of is maybe they were trying to rein it in a little bit, not rein it in, but to try and keep younger viewers like, don't get too scared. But then again, there's some dark, gritty scenes in this show, so I'm just like, I don't know. We didn't hear a quip then. I don't know. The line, it surprised me. It was different, but really, it's not bad. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, and just thinking, being with the Castle of the Crystal, and one of the things we actually sort of got updates about with some of the other Skeksis that weren't present in the show. There was a scene, I think, where with Skeksis, this was a bit of a, like, actually hearing about these different Skeksis, where they might be or whatnot, and so I mean, this was a scene, I think, with Skeksis, like he talks about, we should bring all the Skeksis back to the castle, and then I think he said Skeksis, the ritual master, he says, Skeksis and Skeknar will be useful in a fight. And of course, like with Skeksis, she's the mariner, and she was heavily featured in, I think, in Joe's books with Tides of the Dark Crystal, and as well as Flames as well. And I think Skeknar is the slave master, which I'd be curious if that's his name at the time or whether that ends up becoming his name, sort of, things that might happen down the track in season 2.
I keep asking myself that too. Yeah, because the Garth the Master obviously can't be the Garth the Master right now. But, is there a slave master? Or is that later too, Maybe he's the, tax consultant right now. I don't know.
Yeah. And then I think that so Skekang was mentioned as a strong warrior. As Skekli was also mentioned, the satirists. But actually the one, I mean, this would probably be a good trivia thing, but the only Skeksis that we didn't see or didn't get mentioned is Skekshod, the treasurer. I don't think Skekshod wasn't mentioned or seen at all
in the whole season. Yeah,
in this whole season. Yeah.
He doesn't exist. It's a new timeline. I'm totally.
But yeah, so I mean, that's the thing, and because his role was like as the treasurer. Well, in with the film, his role was a treasurer, and then I sort of thought, I wonder like if he would have been sort of like a good addition, with hanging out with Skeklak and Skekok, going to all the different Gelfling clans, that sort of thing. But of course, I mean, I think with Skekshod, I think we're going to see him in one of the Dark Crystal comic books, I think, with Hup's story. So hopefully we'll get some answers about, what Skekshod was up to. But then again, it was like the conversation sort of ended short anyway to probably not mention Skekshod at the time in the conversation that with the Chamberlain appeared and all that kind of stuff. But I thought that was sort of an interesting there was a little observation I made that Skekshod was the only Skeksis that wasn't mentioned or seen in the season. Yeah,
probably because he's not a very good warrior. they're like, he's useless.
Yeah.
He just can't.
Him and Skektek pretty much like. Yeah. So it was just one of those things where I was just like, again, definitely be interesting to see if we see more of those the different Skeksis come in season 2 if it happens. So. In this episode, I mean, this is a point where, when the Gelflings, they sort of all get out and then we sort of get Tavra. She sort of stays behind, like she decides to attack the general. And I thought that was sort of interesting because at this point, like, she pretty much has two minds at the moment. Like she has her own mind, but also the spiders or the threaders' mind, like, embedded, I guess, essentially into her, which I thought was almost like a bit of a, not a homage, but it definitely reminded me a little bit of Song of the Dark Crystal, especially I think in that book where with Tavra, well, in the book that the spider, I think the name was Krichek, very similar to, I think, might have been, I don't know if it was the inspiration, for the Threaders, but the Threader, the spider Krichek was essentially controlling the body of Tavra. And I just thought, when she's about to attack the general, whether, that was purely, both controlling themselves to decide to attack the general, whether that was all the spider or even all just Tavra's, control of, going for the general. But then, unfortunately, she got stabbed by the Chamberlain.
That's a good question. I really think it was kind of a little bit of both of them, the spider and Tavra, that wanted to stab the general. The general, what do they call it? The Aratham are supposed to be on our side or something, and like, nah, you betrayed us, man. You're dead. You're dead meat. And it's kind of interesting how the Threader and Tavra, the two are kind of one now. It's almost very UrSkaa, two minds have become one. It's definitely, am I jumping ahead again? I don't know what happens in what episode anymore. It makes you wonder if that Threader is going to be, it's going to retain Tavra's personality, and Tavra could return in a season 2 potentially. I'm all for that. I dig that.
Because that was something that did happen at the end of the episode. That was one thing I was actually surprised that she, when her sisters they got her and they got her out of the castle. I thought she was going to die inside the Castle of the Crystal. But as they carried her out, she was still alive, just barely, sort of thing. I was surprised that she actually lived, just for those extra moments. But yeah, especially at the end, like when Tavra died and that Threader sort of detaches itself. And of course, that was the thing. Like I think in Song where I think Kylan, he somehow used Valila, the Gelfling magic, to transfer the mind of Tavra into the spider, and whether that would be very interesting, whether that could potentially happen with Tavra, that Tavra still kind of lives on, and we're not going to know till season 2. And who knows? Yeah,
her death was really traumatic, I think, for me watching the show, just because Tavra is such a good balance between all of the Gelflings, where you have these Rian's on the extreme just because that's his role in the story, and Deet's on the extreme in her own way, and Brea is certainly extreme and all over the place, but Tavra feels like an adult. And her and Farah seem similar to me. They're more even, just the way their voices are. They're very matronly, and not matronly as in terms of older, but they just felt comforting. They were this steady rock, and when we lose both of them in the show, and then you're sort of left with these teenage Gelflings. And then of course there's Maudra and there's others for sure. But Tavra's death, like, I was really hoping that, like, because you think, oh, they killed her, but then they take her out of the castle tunnels and they're leaving, and you're thinking, oh, maybe Tavra has a chance. And then of course she doesn't, and she dies, and it's one of those moments in the show where you feel like, what's going to happen? And I think, again, it points to really good storytelling, because in some ways we know what's going to happen, but we don't know. And we don't know what is going to happen with these characters. Could they end up being in hiding? Could they get on a boat and sail away? Who knows? We're not really sure. So there's hope. There's hope somewhere. And to lose someone like Tavra, especially after Brea and Celadon has lost their mother, it's rough. It's a rough point in the story to get through.
Yeah, and just the scenes like between them three, and as she passes away, and just Celadon and Tavra and Brea just embracing each other, and just it is such a just a shocking and just such a sad moment. And just seeing the little Threader just sort of running away, It is probably one of the most sort of emotional scenes. I mean, that we got, I think, out of the show. Because I mean, with the old Maudra, that just sort of happens out of the blue, or that sort of thing. We didn't have enough time to we had a bit of time to process it in the next couple of episodes when they did the funeral song and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just sort of just adds to that level, I guess. The things to come, like, is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? And yeah, it's just that tragedy aspect to it. Yeah.
I think moving on, a really powerful scene, and it goes on for a while, is when Rian goes to that whatever that thing is with all the swords in it. I don't know what that thing is called, but
I think it's called the Crucible.
The Crucible. Okay. And of course, the sky is lit up, and Rian is essentially, he has the mic, and it's sort of mystical, magical, what's happening, and it goes on for a while, and Rian is really, really finding his voice. For the first time, he is the voice of the Gelfling, and it's a really powerful scene where he's putting the Skeksis on notice, and even though he's not sure what they're going to do, he knows someone's got to do something. And it was really, really great. And just a really, just again, the mythology that they're creating in that moment and moments afterwards is just phenomenal.
I love sort of seeing all the blue flames like throughout the world of Thra. It was sort of, it definitely reminded me a little bit of, like, especially, I mean, a little bit of like Lord of the Rings with Return the King, especially with the lighting of the beacons, and how all the beacons are sort of light up in different areas, like of Middle Earth, and we sort of got a bit, it just reminded me a little bit of that, in this episode where you're seeing the blue flames sort of being lit up across Thra. Which is really cool. And I mean, one thing it was one of those things, like, one thing I would have loved to have seen, it would have been cool to have seen different shots, being able to see like all the different clans, like seeing the message as well. Because I know, like, we get, we get community, when Rian's he's talking, and we see Naya and Gurjin, and then we see Briar, and then Kylan and a couple other characters. But I thought it would have been really interesting to see like the other, just completely other different Gelflings, and sort of getting, seeing their reactions, and seeing the message as well. But I could totally understand, like, from the aspect that, I mean, well, they don't, they probably don't really need, we probably don't need to see all the different other clans, because, I mean, that can be sort of kept as a mystery, whether the message sort of got across to them as well. But that was just one of my thoughts, like, rewatching the episode about that. Yeah.
I hear you. I would have loved that. We could have seen this, the camera panning over the swamp of Sog and all these Drenchen gathering around the fire, and maybe like the Sifa clan, and maybe they have some fires going on a ship or something. I mean, if they had tons and tons of money to make, all these puppets and scenes and sets just for these single shots, that would have been great. Obviously they can't do that. It wasn't feasible to do that, but that would have been really, really cool to see. And I think it would have been totally thematically appropriate to have shots like that. And bet you anything, they would have done that in a heartbeat if they could.
Totally,
base, suggesting something like that. It would have, the scene's great the way it is, but that would have just been, cherry on the cake. That would have been on the cake, on the pie. That would have been amazing.
Yeah. It's just one of those little moments. I mean, it was cool that, actually seeing the librarian in Hurrah, because I'm like, we hadn't seen him for a very long time, so seeing him back was pretty neat. But yeah, it was just one of those things. Yeah, it was just, it would have been pretty neat, but at the same time, I can understand why, whether, the budget, or just like, at the end of the day, it's like, well, is it really necessary? Probably not. But yeah, I mean, but it's still such a great moment. And even like Rand, he's sort of trying to figure out, oh, what do I say? And I love like that moment with Deke where she just says to him, whatever's in your heart. Then he finally is able to sort of talking through the blue flames, spreading the word about getting his voice heard and across Aughra. And I just love that, like, yeah. And then the sort of Skeksis sort of interrupts the conversation, and he sort of takes over, and he's like, it's not going to work out, and all that kind of stuff. And we'll meet you at the Stone of the Wood. It's all going to end there, and then I mean that was the thing. Like at the end of the episode, it was just like, well, did the message got heard? And it was like, well, I mean, got to have hope, and just sort of see what comes of it. It's just sort of really leading up to really, with episode 10, like with this big battle that's going to come.
Heck yeah, coolest battle.
It also seems it's very interesting. Like I don't know about you guys, but I know I felt, with Aughra not being in the picture, you feel like, well, what are they really going to do? What are these Gelfling really going to do? I feel you feel vulnerable for them, even though, because they're training each other how to fight and all of these, things that they're going through. But I still don't feel very confident about it, of course, until we know what happens. Deet sort of steps in and saves them, but they don't seem like this, like the Gelfling force does not seem foreboding, or it does not feel, they don't feel like anything to be afraid of, So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, of course, skipping ahead, like with the Gartham Wars, like really, what are the Gelflings going to do? They're not fighters. They're very peaceful. Maybe they don't get along very well with each other, but they're not fighters. That's not who the species is, but they're going to have to become fighters to defend their world. And they just felt completely unprepared. And you saw it in their faces, how unprepared they felt, or they seemed. But I mean, it sort of worked out for them a little bit. It's a reprieve, and we'll get into that later with episode 10. But yeah, I didn't go into episode 9, like, and you can hear it in Rand's voice when he's talking to Gelfling and talking to the Skeksis. He's saying all of these things that are true, but again, it's like, well, what are you going to do though? What are you really going to do? Because the Skeksis, who they are, they're ruthless, they're greedy, they're tyrants, they're horrible things. So them fighting for more of that, for more control, seems like a no-brainer. They're not going to care what they do, whether they kill or torture or maim. But the Gelfling they're not that type of creature. So I'm just, it was an interesting way to leave things in episode 9.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially just not knowing like what's going to happen next. Whether the Gelflings, whether all of them come or only some of the clans do. Because, I mean, just because they're just, seeing and hearing the message, it's like, well, they don't know what to believe in, is this the truth, or, or could he be lying, or like, it's, it's sort of just a bit unknown, I guess. Like, I mean, at this point in the time that, we don't know if any of the Gelfling clans are going to, come to Stone in the Woods, so it was just going to be sort of a wait and see. It actually made me thought about, I mean, like, especially like sure, they have the Aratham like on their side in the battle, but I'm just curious like how they're able to bring back create a Gartham, and they only did it with one Aratham. It'd be interesting whether there's going to be something that might happen in season 2 where the Aratham, how they might potentially get back to the Skeksis and having Skek Tech to be able to make them make more Gartham. I'm really curious about how that's going to play, whether Skeksis sort of find this power to lure the Aratham back and kill them all, wipe them out, and then reanimate them all.
Yeah, I don't think it's the Aratham pieces that they have a problem with. The thing that's stumping me with the idea that a Gartham is part Grunek, part Aratham is, where the hell are you going to get more Gruneks? You know?
Yeah, because they really thought it was all like pretty much eradicated, and they just happened to come across these two.
But he only uses one of them. The second
exactly,
one goes down the shaft.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm just scratching my head out. Like, I don't know if I've said this, but there's only like three things I have a problem with in AOR. Like 3 things I would probably have changed. And the top of that list is the Grunax being part of the Gartham. I personally, and this is just my opinion, I would have really preferred the Gartham to have been based on lore technology. I thought it would have been cool if the Skeksis got their hands on lore, looked at his little geode crystal activator thing, and made the Gartham eyes based on that geode thing that I don't know what the hell we call it, that geode activator thing, plug it into the shells, and that's another thing is you see that the Gartham in AOR are squirting out pus and juices and stuff, and he's sizzling and zapping it and stuff. These are not empty shells. These are creatures being Frankenstein together. It's part Aratham guts and part Grunak guts. But the Dark Crystal film showed that the Gartham are just empty shells. At least the way I always understood it, they were galvanized and activated by the power of the Dark Crystal. That's what made them tick and go. And move around was, the mystical power of the Dark Crystal. And now that they're these Grunak, Aratham, Frankenstein monsters, I'm just, it kind of just, I'm like, okay. It kind of flies in the face of all Gartham lore. That's why it's like really the biggest problem I have is just it doesn't fit at all in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, because I know, like with the, I think with the Gartham, I think the original sort of ideas behind the Gartham was they were based on, I think, like sea creatures from the UrSkaa's homeworld. Am I right about that, or
you're right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they said that the scientist and the Gartham master work together. The Gartham are based on memories of sea creatures from the UrSkaa planet, and that they're more psychic projections from the Skeksis and the Dark Crystal than actual creatures. Aughra refuses to even call them creatures. They're more of golems. In mythology, a golem is just a bunch of pieces of clay or machinery or something cobbled together and brought to life with like a symbol or a spell or magic or something. Basically what lore is this a bunch of stones cobbled together, and he's only working because of the magic of his little crystal activator. And that's why I'm like very confused that they didn't go hand in hand. I thought this was totally foreshadowing and setting up for the origin of the Gartham. And like it would have been so easy for this scientist Skektek to find Lore's little activator and say, interesting, I'll make a little golem based on I'll grab the pieces of the Aratham and I'll grab this little crystal activator thing, and you could say whether or not he actually voices that they're based on memories or something. He could just say I just want to make a little crab creature or whatever. The point is that they're supposed to be soulless psychic machines, and they're supposed to be empty on the inside. That's what. And sorry, I'm ranting about this. I'm very passionate about this. You see how when Lore was running in some episode, Lore falls into a bunch of pieces, and then his He's like running through the forest. The pieces of his body separate for a few seconds, and then they fly back together. So picture this, the Gartham chasing Gelfling through the forest. These Gartham are based on lore technology. Someone smashes a Gartham in the chest. It falls to pieces. They run away, but nope. Click, 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 and they come back together. They're immortal. They're indestructible. Nothing can stop them because they're based on that lore technology.
I love that.
That's why I'm so passionate about this. Like, that is gold. I'm not saying, I've come up with good ideas. I thought that's what they were doing. I watched it on screen and I thought, oh my God, this is it. And that's why I think in season 2, I'm really hoping that Skeksis, and I think that he is going to be the spy master in AOR. He's going to come back to the castle in season 2, and he's going to work with Skeksis and say, hey, let's alter some things. Let's change some things. How do you make more Gartham? I refuse to believe that they're going to suddenly combine a bunch, make a whole army in season 2 in episode 1 and say, here we go. We got a whole army now. It's like, based on what Grunax? It's just...
Well...
Or another thing that I probably wouldn't like to see this as well. I feel like Skeksis say, I've got a cloning facility. I'll clone all the Garthams. And
yeah, that would be awful.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's some leeway to play around with the Gartham, and because obviously not only do they need hundreds more Grunax, they need to capture Aratham. That's not going to happen. Those Skeksis. Like, how are they going to capture Aratham? Number one. So what I think what would have been more plausible, because I agree, I think that, there's a couple things happening. I think the making or the discovery of the Gartham was a little bit too much taking away the mystery. I don't think we needed to see that happen. I think they just need to be careful in season 2. Don't lift up the curtain for we don't need every question answered. And again, in large part, they didn't. They've been going really well. I also don't think we need to know exactly who Jen and Kira's parents are. Do not fully answer that question. That is a trapping of prequels. Audiences are wondering, but they're not demanding. They might, people at the end of season 2, if we get it, say, oh, man, I think we know who Kira's parents are or Jen's parents are, but we're not sure. That's a great place to leave it. Do not always answer questions. And with the Gartham, I think they need to be careful. And what would be more plausible for the creation of the Gartham would be for them to have trapped in Aratham or several Aratham or whatever, or maybe the Aratham are trapped underground somehow and they unleash the full force of the crystal, and the darkening just twists and turns them, and all of a sudden the Gartham are born.
I mean that's the thing. The Gartham we saw at the end is almost like a prototype or the first version. So it'll be interesting to see if they, the ideas of things, they improve on certain things with the Gartham to make them, what we know them from the film. So yeah, it'll definitely be really interesting to see like what evolves with the Gartham, especially in season 2. So looking forward. Certainly hoping that we'll get that season 2 and hopefully, see the sort of the continuing with the Gartham Wars, if it happens for sure, yeah. And so we'll just have to wrap it up for this episode of Trial by Stone. Again, there's always so much that we talk about in each of these episodes. So we're going to be talking about Age of Resistance for such a long time. And as always, we're going to have plenty of shows, plenty of interviews coming up. So we certainly got a lot to look forward to with the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. So again, just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. And definitely stay tuned for more episodes of Trial by Stone. Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast, is a production of 3 Point Edit. If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also like us on Facebook, follow on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube. If you'd like to know more about the podcast, visit our website at www.darkcrystalpodcast.com. Thank you so much and stay tuned for the next episode of Trial by Stone.